Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me along here this evening. I'm not entirely sure why I was invited along, because unlike Roland and his families, I'm just a blow-in. I came along to this area about the early 1960s, and I would hasten to say that I bear no responsibility for the closing of the factory. But thank you very much nonetheless for inviting me along. Several times during Roland's address, he has mentioned the name of Porter. The Porter family were a very important aspect of Fermanagh and Lisbellaw history for the greater part of 200 years. And I want to give you a wee rundown on 3 generations of the family. Roland has mentioned John Gray V.C. Porter. He was the 3rd generation. But 2 before him was his grandfather, Reverend John Porter. Reverend Porter was a very bright young spark, really bright young spark. And he got the eye and the ear and the attention of really important people, like, for instance, the Archbishop of Canterbury. You don't go much farther up the scale than that. And also, he got the attention of a gentleman called Earl of Camden, who was the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. Now, not only was he friendly with him, but he was a chaplain to the Lord Lieutenant. And when you are a chaplain to the Lord Lieutenant, you can be sure of good things to follow. And good things did follow, because he was appointed to be Bishop of Killala in 1795. He only stayed in Killala for about 2 years. He left Killala in 1797. And with the benefit of hindsight, that was a very good year to be leaving Killala, because there were certain gentlemen coming along in 1798, and you all know that history of the French fleet. But Bishop Porter left Killala, and he came to be Bishop of Crawford. Crawford at that time, the Diocese of Crawford, was reckoned to be amongst the richest diocese in Ireland. Indeed, it may well be the richest diocese in Ireland, for all I know, even now. But then they don't talk too much about money in the church circles. He was the Bishop of Lough Erne from 1798 onwards, and his son was the Reverend Gray Porter. The Reverend Gray Porter was obviously a very rich man. It was he who bought the manor of Bellisle shortly after he came to this area for about, I think, about £68,000. And within a couple of years, he had also bought a large portion of land from the then Earl of Belmore, for which he paid another £130,000. Now, that's about £200,000, which in today's money is probably, I don't know, a couple of million at least, maybe even more. But getting away from him, the next generation was the Porter that really mattered. John Gray V.C. Porter. We wouldn't be gathered here this evening, only that John Gray V.C. Porter decided to invite these 2 gentlemen, Mr. Henderson and Mr. Eadie, to come along here. But John Gray V.C. Porter, born in 1818, he died just 120 years ago next month, in 1903. He was, how should I describe him? He was a force of nature. Other people would describe him as a sort of a human volcano, because he was up and doing with a dozen different things at the same time, some wise and some otherwise. He had a penchant for towers. He probably read the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, but instead of building one large tower, he built 4 small ones. He built one, first of all, the tower on the Church of Ireland, which still exists. He built a tower on the Henderson Eadie Woollen mill. He built another one at the right-hand side of the front of Lisbellaw House, and he built yet another one on Knockninny Hotel. Now, I don't know whether he thought that those 4 together would probably make a Tower of Babel, whether he thought they were in a direct straight line. They are almost in a direct straight line, but not quite. Another of his projects was the Lisbellaw Gazette. Some of you will know about the Lisbellaw Gazette. It was a magazine which came out, I think maybe fortnightly. I'm not quite sure. I think it came out as and when the proprietor decided it would come out. But it really was a magazine to tell everybody about his views. And he had some views about everything. And not only had he views about everything, but he managed over his lifetime to alienate almost everybody from the other more established landlords through to the Orange Order, through to the Land League. He said his magazine, the Lisbellaw Gazette, was allied to no clique or party. A sort of a forerunner of the Alliance Party. I'm waiting on somebody to throw something at me. It wasn't quite that bad. It's still available in the Public Record Office, the Lisbellaw Gazette. Another of his projects was taken onto himself. I want to be rather discreet about this, you know. Taken onto himself when he was knocking on the front door of 50. He took onto himself a young wife, what the modern tabloids, I suppose, would call a trophy wife. He was nearly 50 and she was 18. Now, I don't know what you think, but I think that's not a recipe for marital concord. And so it proved in the courts later on. Now, I'm not going to go into details on that because this is far too genteel an audience for that sort of carry on. But I don't want to dwell on the odd things he did. He did a lot of good. J.G.V. Porter's head was all over the place, all over the time, but his heart was in the right place. And he was confident that he was going to do the best for the county and for Lisbellaw. And many of the ventures which he undertook were with us almost to the present day. The Woollen mill, sadly, hasn't survived. But many of you, when you go out the west side of Inishmore, will go over the viaduct. That was promoted and largely financed by J.G.V. Porter. And when you get over towards Knockninny, there's the Knockninny Hotel, the one with another one of his towers on it. That has been rebuilt, of course, about 20 years ago or thereabouts. And he was big into the drainage of Lough Erne. He was into tourism in Lough Erne even long before Ian Eadie thought about it. He had 2 large steamships, and they were big, even by modern day standards on Lough Erne. He had 2 steamships called the the Belturbet and the Knockninny. They were in excess of 70 feet long and about 12 feet beam, and he took tourists all over. He was able to take them, of course, to his own hotel at Knockninny, but he took them down into the lower lake as well. So his ideas were good. The Woollen mill was perhaps the best and the longest lasting of his ventures. And Roland mentioned the fact that they worked themselves out of existence because their product was so good. And I know people who still have rugs from Henderson and Eadie. They were almost never wear done things. And people took care of them too, because I suppose even though they were cheap by today's standards, yet they were something that everybody wanted and everybody liked. And a good product will always sell. So what did somebody say? You know, invent a new mousetrap and the world will be to track to your door. So that happened with the products from the Woollen mill. The steamboats. The steamboats were a really a good success, and that drainage which he promoted in Lough Erne is effective even to the present time. And most people will know where the marina of the Manor House Hotel is. Well, if you go down there, there's a plaque which commemorates the JGV Porter drainage of Lough Erne. There were a few other ones as well in various other places, but I think I'm right in saying that's the only one that still survives. JGV Porter stood several times for Parliament. I dread to think what effect he would have had he got into Parliament. But he was very close on a couple of occasions. But the fact that he had alienated so many of the more established landowners, people like the Archdales and the Belmores and the Coles and the Crichtons, he didn't quite make it. But I'd love to know how he would have done had he got into Parliament. Without JGV Porter, as I've said, we would not be here this evening. I think he has got a fairly bad press over the years because of the fact that he was so prickly and so hard to put up with. There was a letter which turned up recently, written by one of the Earls of Belmore, in which Earl Belmore said, in the classic understatement, he is a rather peculiar man and a little difficult to deal with. That was certainly an understatement. Folks, you've had enough of this talk of mine. JGV Porter is the reason basic reason we're here. There would have never been Henderson, there would have never been Eadie, right on down to Roland Eadie here in front of us, had it not been for JGV Porter. And I think it'd be well worth a round of applause for JGV Porter.